Hey, welcome back everyone. Glad to have you back here at the channel. Today, I'm going to teach you how to cradle your own wooden substrate to paint on. That's what it's for. So, stick around for that. Okay guys, here we go. We're going to cradle some wood, and we're going to need several things to make this happen, okay? And the reason that we do this is because if you want to work larger, it's usually cheaper to do this. Yes, it takes some more work, but if you want to make a large painting like this is 48 by 48, I think, or 46 by 46. But the point is, to buy that in a canvas would be extremely expensive. We're talking hundreds of dollars, and we can probably do this for 50 bucks. I can make probably 4 or 5 of these, maybe 3. Wood's a little bit high right now. If you want to work larger, this is a good way to go. And one of the other reasons why I do this is because the way I paint, I can be fairly rough on the surface. In canvas, doesn't really give me the stability that I need. So that's why I like the wood substrate. So to do this, we're going to need a piece of plywood, right? You can see underneath here. This one is going to be 30 inches by 40 inches. So this is not extravagantly big, but we're going to do this to make a point, right? So I've bought 1x2s, which you can do this with the 1x2. You can do this with a 1x3 or 1x4. I prefer this, and I cut them long ways so they stand out. That way it gives it a 2-inch profile off the wall. And the reason why I like the 1x2 versus the 1x3 or the 1x4 is because this is still fairly easy to frame if you're going to frame your work. 1x3 or 1x4, you get a really deep profile on the painting, and that can be cool, but if you go to actually put a frame around it, then it's a headache, and you don't really want to do that. You can lay this down this way if you want to. I've just found that I enjoyed this profile more. But what I've done is I've actually cut these at 45-degree angles. Okay, so these angles need to be opposing, because trust me, at some point if you cut these on your chop saw, you'll cut them the same direction and it won't work. So make sure you measure twice and cut once. Okay, 30-inch sticks here, and then I've got 2 40s. We're going to need a center brace. Okay, now remember, when you cut this, you have to take into consideration both of these pieces of wood. Okay, and these 1x2s are really like 2x3 1/4 or 3/4, not 3 1/4, 3/4. So 3/4 and 3/4 together is 1.5 inches. So if this is 30 inches, I'm going to take 1.5 inches off of this center brace, and I'm going to make this 28.5, which is what I have here, and this will go in the center. And then you're going to need some corner pieces. Okay, so these are just smaller scrap pieces that I cut 45-degree angles on, and we're going to put them in the corners like this to help brace it. Now, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to use a nail gun. This is like a finishing nail gun, so it's small nails. You're going to need a lot of these quick release clamps, or regular clamps will work. I just found these to be much easier, and you're going to need a lot of them. We need to go all the way around the painting with the substrate. You're going to need some wood glue. I've got a router, because what I like to do is actually I have the wood cut, the actual panel cut larger than what the frame's going to be, because I found it easier to go ahead and glue the frame to the plywood and have it hanging off of the frame, and then go back with a router and trim it. Now you can cut this down to size and try to line it up, but this is a much easier way to go. You don't necessarily have to have this. You could probably sand it down if you got them really close, but this is a really cool tool that I picked up. These are all battery powered, and I'm not necessarily a Ryobi representative by any stretch of the imagination, but I have been acquiring these. You don't have to have a nail gun, just use screws. If you already have a drill, you could use screws, but I do recommend pre-drilling some holes on these corners before you screw them together. And if you're going to use screws, I highly recommend, instead of cutting 45-degree angles, actually cutting these flat, cut them square, and then put them on top and screw them straight in. That way you have a little more surface area to work with. This 45-degree angle is just something I've become accustomed to over the years, and this is the way I do it. If you can cut them square and still use a nail gun if you have one, but if you're going to screw them, I would recommend doing that. I have done that in the past, and pretty much just going to glue this together and clamp it and let it sit. Now, once upon a time, I used to use this nail gun and actually nail the plywood to the frame on the front side and then putty the holes and sand it. You can do that, but a professor of mine in graduate school mentioned to me that he worried at one point when he was cradling wood that those nails would work their way out. Not 100% sure on that, but I have found that, you know, the wood glue works just fine. It's a really strong bond, and ultimately that saves me more time. If I don't have to nail it and putty it and sand it, then I don't have to worry about it. And I will sand this a little to knock off rough edges, but ultimately on the plywood, I don't mind it to have a little bit of a tooth to it. That way when I prime it, it can take that primer, and I'm not trying to have something super smooth. You know, I like a lot of texture, and so I kind of need that texture. I'm not necessarily looking to have a quote-unquote smooth surface. That is ultimately, you know, what we have here versus canvas, where you've got more tooth on the canvas. But that's not the end goal. The end goal here is just to have a more solid substrate to work on when you're beating down on it a little bit. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and put this frame together, and I'll check back with you in a little while and show you that, and then we'll get to gluing and clamping. Here we go. Oh, I almost forgot. Might want some of these corner braces. Life a whole lot easier. The way I do this, I'll go ahead and show you this before I cut away. So I will go ahead. I like to lay the plywood down and kind of work on top of it. It gives me a little bit of a flat surface to work with, relatively speaking. I'll put a little glue on here. So these little corner brackets you can pick up at Lowe's or Home Depot or your local hardware store probably, and they run about $10 or $15 a piece. I do recommend getting 4 of them at least, just so if you're doing this, you can put one on each corner. Make sure your corners line up, okay? But we're gonna make sure our corners line up. Take my nail gun and make sure you hit straight down that line. There we go. Put a couple nails in there and we're good. And I'll move on to the next one. So I'll see you back here in a little bit. Okay, so now I have my frame together and my corner pieces in, my center brace, and now we need to glue it and clamp it and let it sit. But before we do that, what I do is I take a pencil, and while the frame is laying on the plywood, and make sure that you have extra plywood all the way around, right? Because when I go to route this off, I want to make sure there's enough there to route off and it didn't slide up onto the frame itself, because that would be bad for everybody. So I take a pencil or a pen or crayon if you wish, whatever, and I do a little outline here on the back just to let me know where the frame sits. It just needs to be a general outline. Okay? So I'm going to take my frame off, and now I have an outline right here, and I know exactly where I need to put the glue down. And it just makes it easier than trying to put glue on the frame and then flip the frame over. That's just a mess, and we don't want to do that. Take our glue, and here's the thing about the glue is we want to use a healthy portion, but we don't want it going everywhere, right? So we want to use something to clean up a little bit of what gets pressed out when we start clamping. But in the meantime, I'm going to run a bead down this outline and put a little extra on there because it didn't seem enough. Issue too. So now I'm going to take my frame, I'm going to sit it down on the glue, right? And we're going to get close to where the outline is. There we go. Make sure we got excess wood all the way around. There we go. And now I'm going to clamp it. Oh, hey, welcome back. So everything's glued now and clamped. I'm just taking a little sponge paintbrush and cleaning up some of the glue. The inside is not nearly as important as the outside, because when I go to route this wood off of this frame, the glue will eat my bit on that router all to hell, and I don't want to do that because those things are super expensive, relatively speaking anyway. So that's it for now. I've got everything glued, I've got it clamped. I'm going to let this sit and dry, usually about 24 hours. I mean, wood glue will be dry to the touch within a couple hours, but I like to let this sit overnight and cure and make sure when I go to route it, it's got a secure bond, because I don't want this coming apart. But that's it. 1x2 frame. This is premium pine that I bought. You can use premium pine. I don't recommend using regular pine because it's cheap, but it warps and you'll just end up with a lot of headaches. So premium pine, or you can buy oak if you want to. It's a little more expensive. But these are premium pine 1x2s that I've cut this frame out. The plywood is actually a 1/4 inch. It's a really thin maple 1/4 inch plywood, and it really does a trick. I like the grain in this, even though I'm going to cover all of it up. And I buy this in 4x8 sheets. I don't cut it down. What I do is I determine how many paintings I can get out of a 4x8 based on what I want to do, right? And so I draw all that out and figure out where it needs to be cut, and I leave a little extra, as I said, so I can route this off. And I just have Home Depot or Lowe's, wherever I'm getting the plywood, I just have them strip it down into segments, so it makes it more manageable to bring to the studio. Most places will do that. Most lumber yards will do that. At least if you're here in the States, they'll do that. And all you gotta do is ask somebody. Actually, a lot of times you end up having to wait in line because so many other people are doing that. But that's it. 1/4 inch ply, 1x2, premium pine. Excuse me, not poplar. I wouldn't buy poplar either because it's on the cheaper side. You can do it, but you have to work hard to find solid straight pieces, and that's bad. But that's it for now. We're gonna let this sit. And then I will route this, tomorrow or the next day and get it all cleaned up. And then the last thing that we're gonna do is prime this. Okay, so with this wood, you need to prime it. You need to prime it on the front and the back. You can use regular gesso if you like. I tend to buy a gallon of PVA. So actually, I have got some Kills gray because I wanted some gray. So I've got some Kills gray, which is just a primer. I bought it in a gallon. This runs you like $13 to $15, and that'll go a long way. So prime the back and the front, And that way we keep moisture away from it, because if moisture seeps in, this thing could warp and turn and not be flush or square anymore, and we don't want to do that. Put a couple coats of primer or gesso on it. If you want a smoother surface on the front, the back doesn't really matter. If you want a smoother surface on the front for painting, sand the wood, put a coat of primer on it, sand the primer with a very fine tooth sand grit, and then prime it again. And if it's still not up to par, sand it one more time and prime it again, and you could even sand that down a little bit. So it's kind of up to you. I typically don't even, I will sand the wood, but I won't sand the primer, just because I'm not worried about the smooth surface. The texture I have in my painting, it doesn't matter how smooth the surface is. So that's what I'll do. I'll route this off, prime it again, and then we're gonna be ready to start painting. Start laying out a painting. Okay, what's up guys? We're gonna finish priming this panel. It's a couple days later from when I actually routed this off and sanded it, and I've already primed the back, and now we're gonna prime the top. Okay, finish this thing up. So let's go. You ready? That's it. All primed. It's like magic. So that's all for now. We've cradled and we've primed, and now we're ready to paint as soon as this dries. Of course, we'll lay it out, and I'm going to be laying out a new painting, 2 new paintings actually, because I've done 2 of these, and I'm looking forward to making that happen. I hope you learned something from this. If you're going to use the tools that I mentioned, the nail gun. If you use a nail gun, use a finishing nail gun, okay? The smaller nails. I don't know what the size is, but it's a smaller nail. Don't use like 16 penny nails or anything like that. The router specifically can be extremely dangerous, so don't be afraid of these things. Just be very cautious and respect those tools, okay? If you want to work larger and try to cut some costs and have more of a sturdy substrate to work on, this is the way to go, and this is the way that I do most of my work. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, then hit that like button. If you want to see some more, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be showcasing some of this painting. I'm gonna try to walk you through the entire process of this painting. So yeah, if you want to be notified, hit the bell, and until next time, stay creative.